But let me tell you something. Nobody instruct me unless it is Eastern St. Catherine. And that's why I'm going to continue. So if you want me to think there, I would advise you that we are from Spanish Town. We do not take instruction from anybody unless it is from our constituency. Madam Speaker, I am saying to the Prime Minister, and I'm saying to the members on both sides, do not do anything out of sentiments. Let us look at the bill in its entirety. Fix the bill, because we are not against the bill. We are against what is in the bill. Thank you very much.
Next, orderly to the back right here. Next will be the member from St. Mary Central.
I don't take the speaker.
You may proceed, member.
Madam Speaker, let me begin by saying or repeating, there's no member on this side who does not support or appreciate the urgency of reconstruction. But I can speak with some confidence, Madam Speaker, because the last time the member from South Trelawney got up and spoke so passionately in support of a bill, her minister sent that bill to a joint select committee. And I'm very hopeful, based on the passion that... Madam Speaker, if you listen to the members on that side, with the exception of one, you'd believe the Naira bill came down on tablets of stone. But I'm encouraged by the fact that the Prime Minister submitted 4 pages of amendments today. He amended Clause 2, he amended Clause 3, he amended Clauses 4, 8, 9, 10, 13, 17, 28, and the schedule. And I'm hoping that by the end of this evening, he will go one further, and he will accept the recommendation that this bill be sent to a time-bound joint select committee of Parliament so we can have a better Naira bill. Madam Speaker, this bill creates an authority with extraordinary powers. Under sections 21 to 24, this authority can direct regulators on how to process approvals, when to make decisions. It can impose timelines and procedures, and ultimately, it can trigger a step-in order, allowing the minister to override a statutory authority entirely. To be clear, Madam Speaker, contrary to what the member from Kingston Central claims, this bill does not foster collaboration. Section 21 makes clear the relationship from day one. The authority is allowed to direct these entities from the very first time they meet. Madam Speaker, in the affected parishes where one expects an increase in applications for building permits by homeowners, this bill will put the interest of an investor who can find $15 million to spend ahead of a single mother seeking to build a house so that her children can have a roof over their head. Critically, Madam Speaker, a decision of the minister under a step-in order has the same legal effect as if made by the regulatory agency itself. This is not coordination, Madam Speaker. This is a substitution of the regulatory state. If there's an issue with efficiency, fix the entities, give them the resources, make them more efficient. The Prime Minister told this House that procurement rules will not be in this bill, and they're not, but instead will be established by order under the Public Procurement Act. Madam Speaker, we are being asked to approve a body that will manage billions of United States dollars in reconstruction spending without seeing the procurement framework. And with that framework subject to change without any scrutiny after we have passed this bill. This is a structural gap in accountability, Madam Speaker. The Prime Minister has argued that this model is consistent with the executive agency framework. But the argument does not withstand scrutiny. Yes, executive agencies have an advisor board, but they are not governance free. They are, based on the Executive Agency Act, required to have an approved scheme of management, which shall include the establishment of an advisor board and targets. While advisor boards are mandated by statute, the NARA bill has no such provision. The Executive Agency Act also provides for the appointment of a chief executive officer. It states that the appointment shall be done by the Governor General on the advice of the Public Services Commission. The bill before us today, which involves spending significantly above and beyond that contemplated by executive agencies, simply requires the minister to appoint the CEO. Madam Speaker, the Most Honorable Prime Minister cannot claim to draw inspiration from the executive agency model without accepting the very important safeguards in the Executive Agency Act. The Prime Minister himself acknowledged in his presentation that the executive agency model has had weaknesses. He pointed to targets lacking rigor, to weak enforcement of accountability measures, and to insufficient consequences for underperformance. And yet, those weaknesses are not addressed in the NARA bill. They are replicated, and in some respects, they are deepened. Because here, even the baseline safeguards of the executive agency model are not embedded in the bill. We're told that JAMROC will provide oversight, but Madam Speaker, JAMROC does not appear anywhere in the bill. It is not established in law. The composition is not defined anywhere in the bill. Sir. It has no known reporting relationship or obligation to Parliament. It exists merely in the speech of the Prime Minister. And that is an important thing to note. Because powers are being enacted in a law we are being asked to pass, to support, while oversight is being left to intention. Madam Speaker, as legislators, we cannot pass or vote in favor of bills just with good intention. And I heard the brilliant Jamaican who has been asked to chair the board of JAMROC. But we should pass bills in this House that can also stand up to any negatives that might come in the future. Any change in who the board might be, who the CEO may be. There's another omission in the bill that is troubling, Madam Speaker, and that is a lack of clarity around environmental safeguards, especially environmental impact assessments. This bill defines approving entities to include those responsible for environmental management, natural resource conservation, environmental permits. And under sections 21 to 24, our environmental agencies can be directed. They can be told what time they need to make decisions within, and they can be ultimately overridden through a step-in order. Madam Speaker, we still have no EIA regulations, despite the responsible minister promising that same would have been tabled in his 2025 sectoral presentation. And interestingly, he made the same promise again earlier today. Madam Speaker, some of our environmental groups have advised me that we have had cases, Madam Speaker, where our multilateral partners have had to step in and demand EIAs be done based on their internal guidelines because we had nothing that said an EIA must be done. And the dredging, a project relating to the Kingston Harbour comes to mind. Madam Speaker, what is not in this bill is just as important as what is in it. There's no explicit requirement for environmental impact assessments. So there's no preservation of existing environmental permitting thresholds, no protection against the waiver or compression of environmental review process, no clarity as to how regulators such as NEPA will operate within this framework. Madam Speaker, there should be no ministerial bypass of our environmental protection systems. Give them the resources and give them the support to achieve the efficiency that we desire. The Prime Minister has framed this authority as central to climate resilience, Madam Speaker. But you cannot build climate resilience by weakening environmental oversight. Environmental impact assessments are not just bureaucratic obstacles. They are the very tools that ensure that infrastructure is properly sited, flood risks are understood, ecosystems are protected, and long-term vulnerabilities are avoided. When you combine expedited approvals, directive powers over regulators, and ministerial override authority without explicit environmental safeguards, Madam Speaker, you create the risk of poorly sited developments, of increased flood and landslide vulnerability, of long-term environmental degradation, and ultimately rebuilding the same vulnerabilities we are trying to correct. Madam Speaker, if this authority is to lead a program of resilience, then environmental safeguards cannot be optional, implied, or subject to override. They must be explicitly protected in law. Madam Speaker, it's not hard to fix this bill. I think we can strengthen this bill by explicitly requiring compliance with environmental permitting laws, by clarifying that environmental impact assessments cannot be waived, only expedited, perhaps requiring that certain types of projects must have environmental impact assessments, requiring environmental reporting as part of project approval and monitoring. And Madam Speaker, we have heard reference to international precedents and models. New Zealand, Japan, and the United States and Dominica were cited. And I want to examine, Madam Speaker, not just their existence, but what their enabling laws actually stipulated. In New Zealand, Madam Speaker, the Act set up a cross-party forum comprised of members of parliament from the affected zone who were given responsibility for providing the minister with information or advice in relation to the operations of the Act. I note one of today's amendments, which I welcome, requires consultation with members of communities affected or likely to be affected by the implementation of a project. But what of persons who are elected by these people and these communities to local authorities and to our parliament? What role will they have, and what role should the Act stipulate that we should have? Madam Speaker, it can be strengthened by the draft recovery strategy and plans being shared with the public by the Act. Public consultation mechanism, and I think that has now been addressed. Statutory reporting to Parliament, not just a one-off reporting. And, Madam Speaker, I note a talk about sharing with the public. I'm hoping it will not be like what has been shared with the Spark program, where you have a website with static information, the roads that were approved, but you can't go and access updates on where the road in your community is. So you're driving through mud day in, day out to get to your home blocked off, and you can't go online and get a look on a dashboard to see what the status of the project is. Japan, Madam Speaker, the Reconstruction Agency was mentioned, and that was established under the Reconstruction Agency Act of 2011. That framework required a basic reconstruction plan and continuous monitoring and reporting. The Dominican model, Madam Speaker, which is closer to home, which was established under the Climate Resilience Act of 2018, that model, Madam Speaker, had a formal board and defined governance structures. The bill in front of us today, Madam Speaker, only defines vaguely a CEO. In fact, we have no idea whether this CEO needs any background in terms of planning or in terms of construction or in terms of what exactly is required of the CEO. It is not stipulated. All we know is that the minister, the Prime Minister, appoints the CEO. Across all the jurisdictions mentioned, Madam Speaker, extraordinary powers are granted, but they are paired with statutory safeguards. But the bill before us, oversight isn't mentioned much. The advisory structure is optional. It's not stated in the Act. It's not grounded. The procurement is outside of the bill. Environment safeguards are unclear. We are borrowing the power from international models, Madam Speaker, but we're not borrowing the safeguards or adopting the safeguards. Under Section 4, Madam Speaker, the authority may carry out development, undertake business activities, and do anything it considers necessary. This is an extraordinarily broad mandate, especially when you combine it with the procurement flexibility, the override powers, and the minimal oversight mentioned earlier. And so, Madam Speaker, my intervention is not about opposing the bill. It is about how do we strengthen it so that we can have a reconstruction authority in as quick a time as possible with the necessary governance. So we can establish, Madam Speaker, JAMROC in the Act, in the bill. We can require performance agreements to be set up with the Cabinet Office. We can define procurement in the Act, in the bill. We can better protect environmental safeguards explicitly and mandate EIAs for certain types of projects. We can adopt the BOJ model, Madam Speaker, and require the Chief Executive Officer to report to Parliament from time to time so we can question him. Currently, the bill only requires that reports be tabled, but there's no opportunity for us to properly interrogate those reports in the Parliament. We strongly believe, Madam Speaker, that this bill will benefit from being referred to a joint, time-bound joint select committee with a narrow window for further consideration and deliberation. Madam Speaker, we all agree on the urgency. We all agree on the scale of the task. But urgency cannot justify imbalance in governance. We should not sacrifice good governance and accountability on the altar of expediency. This bill concentrates power, Madam Speaker, in one minister. It weakens statutory oversight. It leaves critical safeguards undefined. If we are to rebuild Jamaica, Madam Speaker, let us do so not only with speed, but with accountability firmly embedded in law. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Next is the member from Clarendon North Central.